We're in Watson Lake, Yukon, and I crawled underneath and discovered that the inner CV boot on the passenger side of our 2000 Delica L400 is in rough shape. It's not letting in dirt yet, but the oil is starting to come out. And we do have a spare CV boot, and we're in a reasonably sized town. So we're going to take a crack at taking all this apart. And at the same time, I have a friend who is doing CV boots on his Delica L400. So we're going to make some content and just talk through what is behind this wheel. Because if you spend time repairing your Delica, chances are you will be right here. This is your place of worship. Now, I'm trying out something new this time. I drove this Delica up on a couple pieces of wood to compress the suspension on this side, and this gave me a little room between the stop, just right underneath of here, and the lower and the upper control arm. And I've just folded in half this book to give us about a centimeter of, basically I pushed the suspension and held it up by about a centimeter. And this is what I hope is an alternative to releasing the tension on the control arms or on the torsion bars further back. So cross my fingers that we can leave the suspension fully loaded up and we don't have to touch any of that. Before I had the wheel off the ground, I loosened the wheel nuts, of course, and also loosened these bolts, which is part of this essentially permanently locking hub right here, because these rotate with the rotor and everything. If you're already up in the air, you can just have somebody stand on the brakes to prevent this from rotating. And next thing, I'm going to shove this wheel under the big cross member that goes across underneath, and I'll just use that as my jack stand in case the vehicle decides to fall off the jack. Next up is to pop off this cap, which covers up the clip that holds the CV axle splines onto the hub. So now I don't feel like buying an expensive snap ring tool, so I'm going to see if I can remove this snap ring right here without spending $250 on a Watson Lake snap ring kit. I'm just trying to get a bit of a pry on this. Perfect. Okay, that's off. Now we need to get some napkins. Make sure we're keeping everything clean as we go here. Now that we've got this hub off, a big part of any project is taking the time to set yourself up, to keep everything clean, keep it all organized, to be able to line it up. Hey, now that we have our hub taken off, you can see the ring, which is used to control the tightness of the wheel bearings. And if you're happy with the tightness of your wheel bearings, then take a photo and make sure these screws and this little keyway where this piece goes into, take a photo of this so you can put it all back in exactly the same way. And because you don't want to be over tightened in particular or have loose wheel bearings. And then behind that is the main screw, which goes onto this shaft, and that controls the amount of load on those wheel bearings. And I don't like having Phillips on this. there's really any particular reason for it to be Phillips. You could put on something like a DIN 912 hex bolt in there, and then you'd have an Allen key, which is a little more predictable and less likely to strip out. So our Rhodes screwdriver set is not good enough to be able to get these screws out of here. A lesson for me: when I get home, all of those screws are going to be taken out one way or the other, and they're going to be replaced with a better quality screw, something that can be put in and out more times, more reliably. So what that means is that I'm going to leave the whole hub and rotor on the steering knuckle. I still need to free up the brakes and get the whole brake caliper out of here. So we'll just leave it together. It's just a little heavier. We are pulling the slide pins out of the brake calipers. This is something you'd be doing if you are changing brake pads or changing calipers. Once we get this freed up, I'll explain this, and I'll also show the spare parts we carry for repairing brakes if we have problems on the road. And before I get this freed up too much, I need to have a bungee cord ready so that I can hang this caliper on it, because we never want to hang the weight of the caliper on our flexible brake lines. Okay, that's good. These slide pins, the rubber bushing always goes on the bottom, and then the one that's just a solid steel, that goes on the top. That seems common across Toyotas and everything I've pulled wrenches on. Now let's go get a bungee cord. So here we can see our brake pistons, and we have our brake pads, obviously. I'll just pop these out of here. This little squeaker, which starts to howl when your brake pads have gotten thin, this always seems to go on the inside for whatever reason. I'm also removing this big bracket that holds the brake caliper on. I'm sure there's some kind of a common name for it. And the only reason I'm taking this off is because I have to pick up all of this when we unbolt our ball joints. And it's heavy and it's awkward, and I don't like that. So I'm going to pull this off just to reduce the weight. And I also think it is, this would have to be taken off if you were getting into like changing your rotor. And when you're at home, this is a good little project to get in, remove these bolts, clean everything up, put on some anti-seize, and just so you know it's going to come off nice in the future. to start filming again. Very happy we found this pile of plywood here. Give everything a clean home to sit. Next up, since all of this is coming off, I'm going to unbolt and unplug the ABS cable over here, and then I'll just follow along the control arm and unsnap it from there. And of course, I should not have hung the brake caliper over that cable, so I'll fix that up now. And it always makes sense to have a plan for what you're going to do with your hardware. For instance, this bolt came out of here, so I just threaded it back in there. At some point, I would like to learn how to potentially waterproof these connectors a little better. Maybe some dielectric grease. Be a good project. And now we just let this ABS cable hang free and try not to smash it when we get into moving heavy stuff around. And next up is breaking this tie rod connection, which is a fairly violent operation. We just have to pull this cotter pin out first, and then I'll use a 19mm to loosen that off, hit it with a little bit of WD-40 after I've cleaned it up with a brush, and then we'll come in and put this nut on backwards, and we'll just hit that sharp with something, maybe a rock, and hopefully the cone will break free and our tie rod will be undone. I really appreciate how Mitsubishi has limited the number of sizes of sockets you need. You know, if you have 10, 12, 14, 17, 19, you can do a lot. Wrenches and sockets. Now the trick here is that we need to apply a bunch of force to this, but not so much force that we smash up the threads. Although I am traveling with an extra tie rod end, so outer tie rod. This is the outer tie rod. Inner tie rod is under this boot. Once we have everything taken apart, we can discuss that a little more. Let's see if I have to buy a hammer or I can do it with this rock. Doesn't seem to be going so far. Thread is still moving, so that's a good sign. There we go. That's free. Yay! Take the opportunity to inspect. Everything looks pretty good there. Sometimes these can, rather than wear out the tie rod end, just the boot fails. And of course, feel for any looseness in there. Good enough. Took a minute to cover up the spline next to the wheel bearings here. And next we are going to clean this up It'd be nice to have some compressed air to blow the dirt around, or even a vacuum cleaner, but we don't. So then I will just loosen these bolts. It's great the way you can unbolt your ball joints on this van without actually removing the ball joints. And you know, as long as these bolts are in healthy condition, got a little bit of anti-seize on them, all of this can be taken apart without doing this nasty operation of separating the cone of the ball joint on the upper and the lower. In fact, I only touch these breaking the ball joint cone loose from the knuckle. I'll only do that if I am actually changing the ball joints. It's just it requires way too much force, and I find that it always gets broken doing so. The threads get screwed up. So just use the bolts instead. That's what they're there for. Good. I'm just loosening these off a little bit. And if we take them all the way out, then when we're working with the lower ball joint and getting all this ready for removal, this thing will just be flopping over all over. So we want to leave it more or less hanging. On the lower control arm, there is 4 bolts that holds the lower ball joint into this control arm. They're just 17 millimeter. And we can get them completely unbolted. We'll just need a 17 millimeter wrench on the top. And then at that point, we are pretty close to taking this whole knuckle out. Now that we have the nuts taken off the lower ball joint here, there's just a little horn which we're going to remove. On some variations of this ball joint, this is actually cast into the ball joint, so you can't unscrew it. On this, it looks like it's just a 10 millimeter. And I don't exactly know its function. It seems like if all of these unbolted and that's all that was retaining us in here, that would be a very bad day already. I don't think it'd make that much difference. And the other thing, as all this comes apart, we need to get these bolts, and the back ones aren't really so bad. Also because our steering has completely loosened up now since we removed the tie rod. We can just flop back and forth, and hopefully they can all come out. They do end up fighting a little bit with the CV axle, so it's a bit of a pain, but it is possible. So I think for this last one, with the axle being right here, I will have to unbolt these and just allow all of this to start shifting down. Okay. All right, now the fight begins. Basically, I need to get this bolt out of here. Try not to smash up the CV axle right here. Get this last, oh, okay, you're out. Now, the real crux of the operation is that this lower ball joint really doesn't like to come out of this control arm. And obviously, it would have been nicer if I'd have got the whole hub out of here. There we go. Now we need to put this somewhere clean. We need to not wreck this cable. And now, this all seems to have come out of this pretty good. We'll make sure we wipe the grease, or wipe the dirt off the grease there, of course. And now we use our CV as a slide hammer to pop this out of the axle. And our little retaining clip looks in pretty good shape. And hopefully, now we're gonna pull all this apart. Doesn't look like it's got to the condition where it would be letting dirt in. Gonna tear all this apart and put on a new boot, and we'll try to get this in such that this does not wreck this seal. What is that? That's kind of concerning. That just fell out.